A new rider arrives, and everyone pretends it is just a paint job. A new team walks on stage, and everyone pretends it is just tradition. But MotoGP never reveals its real changes with noise. It reveals them with timing. Pramac became the first team to unveil a 2026 livery in Siena. And the headline is easy: Toprak Razgatlioglu in MotoGP colors, finally. The hard part is what that reveal actually admits. Yamaha is walking into 2026 with a V4 still becoming itself, a star rider in Fabio Quartararo still needing proof to stay beyond 2026, and a rookie who is already warning the paddock that the transition will be very hard. So the question is not whether Toprak is talented enough to survive MotoGP. The question is uglier. Is 2026 a debut season, or a controlled crash test where Pramac and Yamaha measure how much pain a new era can tolerate before something breaks? Because if Toprak cannot bring his famous braking violence onto Michelin tires until 2027, and Yamaha already expects most of 2026 to be development rather than results, then the first year is not a stage. It is a laboratory. If this is true, then everything fans believe begins to fall apart. The presentation in Siena was ceremonial, but the details in the reporting tell a colder story. Pramac's launch was not just a reveal of colors. It was Yamaha's first public attempt to sell belief in a project that is still unfinished. MotoGP's official coverage confirmed Pramac were the first to take the covers off 2026, with Jack Miller and Toprak headlining the presentation in Siena. That matters because being first is not a fashion choice. It is a claim of intent. When a manufacturer is confident, it controls the narrative early. The official presentation calendar shows how fast the paddock tries to shape belief before Sepang. VR46 on January 14th, Aprilia on January 15th, Ducati on January 19th, then Yamaha and Trackhouse on January 21. And this year, Yamaha needs belief more than anyone. Yamaha is moving away from its long inline-4 identity and leaning into a V4 that has already been shown publicly as a prototype. Yamaha's own communications described the V4 prototype being raced as a wildcard by test rider Augusto Fernandez at Misano for the first time. Reporting also underlined that the V4 was still a long way off, and that Valencia was planned as a key moment, with Yamaha's 2026 race riders set to try the latest version at the test. That context turns Pramac's Siena launch into something else, a recruitment poster for patience. Toprak's own words, delivered at the same event, refused the fantasy. He called the moment a dream, but immediately framed the season as brutally difficult. For him, it is a really hard season because it is the first time on a MotoGP bike, and after superbikes, it is really different. Then he dropped the line that sounds small, but is actually everything. Everyone was listening to me, which is very important. Listening is not a compliment. Listening is a necessity when the bike is still learning what it wants to be. Because Toprak is not entering a stable ecosystem where his job is to adapt. He is entering a development operation where his job is to translate feeling into direction, while also learning to survive on tires and electronics that punish his instincts. This is why Pramac's launch matters. It was not a celebration of arrival. It was a contract between three desperate needs. Yamaha needs data. Pramac needs relevance. Toprak needs time that MotoGP rarely grants. Fans want to treat this as a simple transfer story. A world superbike champion crosses over, the style shocks the grid, and either he becomes a hero or he becomes a cautionary tale. But Toprak is already telling you the real problem. He is not promising fireworks in 2026. He is promising work. He is famous for braking late, hard, and unnatural, the kind of aggression that makes superbike footage look broken. And he is also famous for how much of that identity is tied to the tires and the way the bike moves under him. In Siena, he did not pretend he can bring Toprak style immediately. He described the limitation clearly. He needs to bring his style, but maybe not this year. He pointed to 2027 as the moment he believes he can ride like his style at around 90%. That one admission reorganizes the entire debut season. If your defining weapon is delayed, your first year becomes a negotiation with physics. Michelin tire behavior rewards corner speed and smoothness in ways that can punish brutal braking. Toprak is already describing a forced hybrid. Some tracks you need more corner speed. I need to change a little bit my riding style, and I need to do a mix. Now combine that with Yamaha's V4 transition. This V4 is not a finished monster being handed to a rookie to learn. It is a prototype becoming a race bike, with Yamaha itself framing the wildcard appearances as real-world evaluation. Additional reporting has tracked how the V4 specification changed across tests and wildcards, which is a polite way of saying the ground keeps moving. So what does Toprak's really hard season actually mean in practice? It means every weekend is a compromise between three things that do not naturally align: a rookie learning MotoGP braking references, aero load, and rear tire management; a bike learning how to deliver V4 performance without destroying its own rideability; a team learning how to translate Toprak's superbike language into MotoGP engineering decisions. That is why everyone is listening to me is a dangerous sentence. Listening is pressure. Listening means his feedback may steer a prototype that will also decide Quartararo's future. And Quartararo is the silent third rider in this story, even when he is not on the Pramac stage. Yamaha's V4 is widely seen as a last-chance project to convince him to stay beyond 2026, while Yamaha simultaneously admits much of 2026 will be development, not results. That is the contradiction. You cannot ask a champion to believe in a bike that is not ready, while asking a rookie to help develop it, while asking a satellite team to deliver credibility with it, all in the same year. Someone pays, someone gets blamed, someone gets left behind. But this is where the entire story snaps. The Sienna launch looks like confidence, but the hidden contradiction is sitting inside Toprak's honesty. Pramac unveils a livery to announce a debut season, but the rider himself is telling you he cannot use his defining weapon until the tire era changes. That is not a debut designed for performance. That is a debut designed for survival and information. The political betrayal is quieter. Yamaha's V4 move is the manufacturer admitting the inline-4 path was a dead end. That decision is not neutral. It rewrites the development hierarchy. It rewrites who gets listened to, and it rewrites who gets protected when results do not come. The fact that Toprak feels heard is positive for him, but it also reveals Yamaha's weakness. They need every usable signal they can get. The technical flaw is not a single broken part. It is that the bike itself is a moving target. Wildcards and tests have shown Yamaha changing the V4 package repeatedly as it searches for a baseline. When the baseline is unstable, the rider becomes the stabilizer, and that can fracture a rookie's confidence fast. The psychology rupture is inevitable. Toprak has spent years building an identity around braking domination, late entries, and a certain kind of controlled chaos. MotoGP's Michelin tires and aero-heavy machines punish chaos. They punish the very moments where superbike riders can usually impose themselves. So 2026 is not asking Toprak to learn MotoGP. It is asking him to temporarily become someone else, to ride in a language that is not his, and to do it while the bike underneath him is also learning to speak. That is a trap year by design. Now look at the schedule and understand the cruelty. The Sepang shakedown begins January 29th to 31st, with the first full Sepang test from February 3rd to 5th, and then Buriram on February 21st to 22. Those early kilometers are where Yamaha must decide what direction is real. That means Toprak's early discomfort is not just a personal struggle. It is a dataset that can shape the entire season. This is why Pramac went first. They needed to plant belief before the first numbers arrive. And the first time Toprak finds himself losing the front because he tried to brake like himself, the sport will not call it development. The sport will call it not MotoGP level. That is how careers get framed before they are even allowed to begin. Everything you thought you understood stops working here. The obvious story says a rookie is the vulnerable one, and the factory is the stable one. In 2026, that logic flips. The rookie arrives with a defined identity and clear hunger, while the factory arrives with uncertainty disguised as innovation. Toprak is the new name, but Yamaha is the real newcomer. A V4 program means new power delivery, new engine braking character, new packaging, and new demands on aero and electronics. The rider who should be learning is also being asked to teach. That is the reversal. And Pramac, the team fans still instinctively label satellite, becomes the place where Yamaha's most important questions get answered first. Not in the factory garage, not in the speeches. On the second bike of the second structure, in the hands of a rider who is still translating his own instincts into a different language. This is where advantage flips. If Toprak adapts quickly, Yamaha risks chasing headlines before stability. If he adapts slowly, Yamaha risks turning his learning curve into a verdict. Either way, the rider becomes exposed. The underdog becomes the threat, but not in the way fans expect. The threat is not Toprak beating Yamaha's established stars. The threat is Toprak's season becoming the evidence board for decisions that will shape Quartararo's future, Pramac's status, and Yamaha's credibility for the 2027 reset. So 2026 stops being a romantic debut and becomes a power fight over interpretation. Who gets believed when the lap times do not match the posters? The immediate consequence of Toprak's honesty is that it removes the easy propaganda from everyone. Pramac cannot sell 2026 as a fair test of Toprak's ceiling if he has already explained the ceiling is postponed by tires and adaptation. Yamaha cannot sell the V4 as an instant miracle if their own test rider has described it as still far away. And Quartararo cannot be expected to accept development year logic forever if he sees a rookie being used as a development instrument instead of a race-winning weapon. This is where Pramac's role becomes brutal. Pramac is not a factory team, but in 2026 it becomes a frontline experimental unit for Yamaha's new era. The first satellite structure that Yamaha can use to multiply data while it still has concessions. And concessions matter because they signal Yamaha is still rebuilding. So every poor weekend in 2026 will trigger a fight over interpretation. If the bike is slow, is it because Toprak is adapting? If Toprak struggles, is it because the bike is unfinished? If both struggle, is it because Yamaha's V4 concept is late? Or because MotoGP's current tire era is incompatible with Toprak's advantage? The paddock will choose the story that benefits its politics. Ducati will watch this with quiet satisfaction. Ducati runs 4 factory spec bikes in 2026, meaning their development can spread across more riders without turning any single rider into a sacrificial experiment. That is power. Yamaha is trying to do a similar thing through Pramac, but with a bike still searching for itself. Aprilia will watch it as opportunity. Bezecchi's late 2025 surge proved Aprilia can win races when the conditions align, but the top of the sport still belongs to machine and rider combinations that can win in every phase. If Yamaha's 2026 is a development season, then Yamaha is effectively surrendering the year as a title fight, which creates room for other projects to steal momentum. And the human consequence inside Pramac is the Miller variable. Jack Miller is not a rookie. He knows MotoGP's pace, he knows Michelin, he knows how to survive in chaotic weekends. Pramac pairing him with Toprak gives them a reference line that is brutally useful. At the Siena launch, Toprak emphasized how much he values Miller as a teammate and how much they are working together. That sounds friendly. It is also structural insurance. If Toprak is lost, Miller provides a baseline. If Miller is slow, Yamaha knows the problem is the bike. If Miller is fast and Toprak is not, the story turns against Toprak. If Toprak is fast and Miller is not, the story turns against Miller if both are inconsistent. Yamaha's V4 becomes the headline. There is no safe outcome. There are only different forms of blame. And that is why Toprak's comment about being listened to is the most important line of his entire launch. Because he is not asking to be celebrated. He is asking to be taken seriously as a development voice while he learns a new discipline. That is the only way he can avoid being judged purely by results in a year that will not be fair to judge by results. GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist. And now the part nobody is ready for. Toprak's debut season is happening in the final year of an era that suppresses his signature weapon and amplifies Yamaha's weaknesses. That means his 2026 results, good or bad, will be used as evidence for arguments that may be completely wrong. If he struggles, people will say MotoGP exposed him, even if the tire era is literally the thing he believes is limiting his style. If he flashes brilliance, Yamaha will claim the V4 is already working, even if those flashes come from Toprak's genius rather than the project's maturity. And if Quartararo watches 2026 unfold as a year of constant explanation, he will not be convinced by speeches. He will be convinced by the only thing MotoGP respects: speed that arrives on time. So the future threat is not Toprak failing. The future threat is everyone misunderstanding what his first year means, then making contract decisions, development decisions, and identity decisions based on that misunderstanding. Because 2027 is a trapdoor. The 850cc equal spec era begins and the current tire era ends. That reset will reward riders and teams who arrive prepared, not hopeful. And Toprak is openly positioning 2026 as preparation. So ask the questions that matter and do not allow comfort. What happens if Yamaha's V4 is still a long way off by mid-2026 and the project becomes a public embarrassment rather than a quiet rebuild? What happens if Toprak spends a whole year adapting away from his instincts and then the 2027 tire reality rewards a different style than he expects? What happens if Pramac becomes the place where Yamaha sends experiments, not the place where Yamaha builds winners, and the team's status changes from aspirational to disposable? MotoGP will answer those questions with brutality, not sentiment. And the livery in Siena will not be remembered for colors. It will be remembered as the moment Yamaha admitted it needed a new engine, and the moment Toprak admitted he needed a new self. GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist.